Let's address the elephant in the room. The Pixel XL is basically the closest you'll ever come to an iPhone running Android. Somewhere in Cupertino, there's likely to be a team of lawyers poring over Google's latest flagship and looking at every patent, which is likely what Google did when coming up with this design. By way of comparison, the Nexus lineup has always offered quirky, unique designs that stood out amongst a sea of competition, and the generic design of the Pixel XL removes this. The front especially doesn't stand out at all, and you could easily mistake it for another generic smartphone, especially with the bottom chin beneath the display essentially being wasted space. The design itself is almost certain to be the most polarizing element of the Pixel XL, and personally, I'm on the fence. While the design was generic at first, it has definitely grown on me, but at the same time, I do miss the quirky design of the Galaxy Note 7 and S7 Edge. With so many Android smartphones on the market, Google is largely relying on its marketing push and word of mouth to help the Pixel XL stand out, as it's unlikely many users will pick this handset based on its design. On the back, there's a combination of a matte metal finish and a glossy plastic finish in the upper half of the back, and it's an eclectic combination, which leaves a lot to the imagination. The matte part of the finish provides welcome grip, while the glossy part adds one of the few elements that make the Pixel XL stand out. The back also houses the fingerprint sensor, which is rather snappy, but more on that later, and Google's G logo, which replaces the Nexus logo of old. Moving around the rest of the phone, and on the right, you've got the power and volume buttons, which are quite stiff, yet easy to press. On the left, you've got the single SIM card tray, and for those used to dual SIM and or microSD card expansion on other Android phones, neither of these is available on the Pixel XL. Up top is the headphone jack, while at the bottom is the USB Type-C port, single speaker and microphone. The build of the Pixel XL leaves a lot to be desired for me. Despite not being dropped at all since I've had it, there are a few dents on the body already and a couple of scratches as well. In a bid to ensure the software and camera elements are great, it does seem that Google has cut corners with the design, at least in my opinion, and honestly, I wouldn't expect these concerns from a flagship, let alone one that costs as much as the Pixel XL does. The main difference between the smaller Pixel and the larger Pixel XL is the display, with the larger handset sporting a 5.5-inch Quad HD AMOLED display. Sporting 2560 x 1440 resolution and a pixel density of 534 pixels per inch, it's a bright, vibrant panel that's a joy to use, even in outdoor conditions. Corning Gorilla Glass 4 protection also helps to protect the handset, so the display should survive a bump or two, even if the actual build may look worse for wear. Running the Pixel XL's AMOLED display through our display tests reveals a slightly cooler color temperature of 7859 Kelvin, which essentially means the screen has a blue tint. Interestingly, at least according to our spectrophotometer readings, when the display is set to the standard mode, rather than the default adaptive mode, it scores 7131K, which is much more accurate compared to the recommended temperature of 6500K. A max brightness of 420 nits, even under direct light, doesn't quite tell the full story, as although the Pixel XL has a lower max brightness than other devices, there are no noticeable legibility issues in direct sunlight. Overall, I'd have to agree with Lan when he says anything you want to do on this phone, you won't be disappointed. Under the hood, the Pixel XL is powered by the latest Snapdragon 821 chipset, which features two high-power Cryo cores at 2.15 GHz and two high-efficiency cores at 1.6 GHz alongside 4 GB of RAM and an Adreno 530 GPU. With this package, the Pixel XL is mostly future-proof, at least until Qualcomm's next flagship chipset, expected to be the Snapdragon 830, lands next year. Before getting into the actual real-world performance, let's see how the package stacks up against the flagship processors inside the competition, including the A10 Fusion chipset powering the iPhone 7 Plus. First up in our benchmark tests is Geekbench 3, which tests a phone's ability to handle various CPU-intensive tasks, and the Pixel XL scores 2,234 in the single-core test and 5,054 in the multi-core test. Turning back time, it's easy to see how vastly improved the Snapdragon 821 is over the Snapdragon 810 chipset inside the Nexus 6P, which scores 1,282 and 4,212 respectively. Qualcomm's latest processor does fall slightly short of the new 18 Fusion chipset inside the iPhone 7 Plus, which scores 3,419 and 5,395, and Samsung's Exynos 8890 powered Galaxy S7 Edge, which scores 2,107 and 6,397. Overall, the benchmarks show the Pixel XL has a computing package that's on par, if not better, than the one inside its chief rivals, but as we've seen previously, benchmarks scores don't necessarily reflect real-world performance. On the hardware front, the Pixel XL definitely seems to be on par with most flagships, save for the lack of micro SD card expansion. There's two storage options, -32GB and 128GB, and while you do get unlimited full-resolution uploads to Google Photos with either Pixel, you'll likely want to grab the 128GB version. In just 10 days, I've managed to use up 25GB of the 29.7GB available out of the box, albeit this was without having backups to Google Photos turned on. Having full uploads to Google Photos enabled coupled with automatic backups when connected to Wi-Fi and charging makes it rather simple to always ensure the images have been synced to Google's servers. When you do run low on space, Assistant's Free Up Space feature checks which images on your phones have been backed up and can then delete them from local storage to free up space. As long as you've got an internet connection, you'll still be able to see and access those images in the Photos app, but it's quite slow, especially on a mobile data connection. Storage aside, the Pixel XL does come with a plethora of hardware features you'd expect to see on a flagship smartphone in 2016, including LTE Cat 12, dual-band Wi-Fi NAC, Bluetooth V4.2, NFC, and a reversible USB Type-C 3.0 connector. Also on board in a fingerprint sensor on the rear, which is slightly larger than most fingerprint sensors used on other Android smartphones. Like the sensors in Huawei handsets, the Pixel XL also supports a swipe-down gesture that lets you quickly pull down your notification panel, and while you won't use it all the time, it's definitely a nice feature to have. The fingerprint sensor is also rather quick to unlock your handset and seems to work almost all the time, although sometimes it's possible to remove your finger before it's been recognized. That being said, you'll most likely find it the simplest way to unlock your phone, especially as you can unlock and wake the phone from sleep using just your fingerprint. While the hardware certainly seems to be on par with most flagship devices, it definitely seems that Google has stuck to the bare minimum. A software and services company at heart, this definitely shows, as the Pixel XL relies on software elements to make up for any deficiencies in the hardware. The problem for Google is that charging a large amount for a flagship and then offering the bare minimum hardware isn't a combination that entices users, and against something like the Galaxy S7 Edge, which offers much better hardware at a similar price, the Pixel XL definitely comes up short. Under the hood, there's a 3450 mAh battery powering the entire Pixel XL experience, which is slightly more than the 3000 mAh unit inside the Pixel. The extra capacity doesn't deliver any different battery life, and Josh, Lynn and I have all had mixed results when it comes to the battery life. Lynn's handset generally lasts an entire day and consistently achieves around 5 hours screen on time, even with very heavy usage. Meanwhile, the battery life on Josh's handset is on the lower end of the average, with around 4 hours screen on time, again from a day of heavy usage. Myself, I've been very impressed by the Pixel XL battery life. As someone who travels quite regularly, I usually run into the problem of bad signal abroad, which in turn has a marked impact on battery life. During the past 10 days, I've been in China and Hong Kong, and only on one occasion did the Pixel XL fail to last an entire day. That particular day was when I spent many hours taking photos using the camera with the screen mostly on medium to full brightness, and while I only average around 5 hours screen on time as well, I'm less worried. Simply put, I'm so used to having to manage battery when using other Android phones that it's rather refreshing not having to really worry about the battery on the Pixel XL. For the times when you are running low, the Pixel XL supports rapid charging, and within 30 minutes, you'll find you can add up to 40% battery, although the whole thing does take around 2 hours to charge, which is definitely slower than Qualcomm's own quick charge solution. Either way, rapid charging definitely helps to top up the battery when you've only got a limited amount of time. At the launch of the Pixel and Pixel XL, Google focused on 5 key selling points for its flagship handsets, with the camera one of the key messages. Google claims the Pixel XL has the highest XMark rating for any smartphone, with a score of 89, but as we've seen previously, it doesn't always reflect what's most pleasing to the eye. As it stands, the Pixel XL camera definitely seems to live up to Google's claims, mostly. I'll agree that in daylight, the images are very sharp, very well detailed, and the camera has excellent dynamic range. This is especially true in the HDR Plus mode that does a great job of toning down the highlight and shadows, without making the images look unnatural or fake. Thanks to HDR on the sensor, rather than in post-processing as with previous Nexus devices, the processing is the best part, with the camera taking next to no time to process an image rather than the slower experience found on the Nexus 6P. Over the past 10 days, I've been traveling to Hong Kong and China, and the Pixel XL has not let me down, proving time and time again to be a very reliable performer. Images are incredibly sharp in almost all conditions, and while the lack of manual controls doesn't give you much flexibility in adjusting your shots, touch to focus on a subject and adjusts for the conditions rapidly, and the exposure slider gives you more of levels than most Android devices. In low light, the camera also continues to deliver, although it does have a few chinks in its armor. The biggest of these is the lack of optical image stabilization, as while the electronic stabilization does deliver somewhat, you need to keep your hands perfectly still, otherwise you'll likely end up with a noisy image full of grain. During my time with the Pixel XL, I've found that while the low light performance isn't the best, most of the time, the photos are still good enough to share on social, which is all most people will use it for. Overall, there's no doubt that the camera in the Pixel and Pixel XL is vastly improved over the competition, and in the end, Google has made a camera that makes it easy for anyone to take great pictures. Offering excellent speed, even when using the double press of the power button shortcut to launch the camera, incredible photos and good video recording, there's no doubt that this smartphone camera is on par with the very best. The Pixel and Pixel XL run the latest Android 7.1 Nougat OS out of the box, along with all the goodies it brings, with Google's new Pixel launcher on top. The Pixel launcher, new in its own right, is the evolution of the Google launcher and brings with it a revamped yet familiar user experience with Google Assistant and a few minor changes that have a huge impact on the overall user experience. By far, the biggest selling point for the Pixels is Google Assistant, Google's new AI-based voice assistant that offers some incredible features. The same assistant that powers Google Hello, but now available through all the Android interface. It is only available in the Pixel and Pixel XL, at least in its current form. Essentially, it is a much smarter version of Google Now and allows you to communicate with Google using more conversational speech patterns. The ability to be more conversational means you can say a lot more to it, you can joke with it, and you can even ask it to read you a poem. The basics haven't been forgotten either, as you can also use it for the basics, such as setting a timer, checking the calendar, the weather, sports scores, or more. For those that often have a full diary, the daily briefing feature allows you to digest your agenda for the day ahead alongside other information, without having to do much other than set it up and say good morning. It's a really, really useful feature and is also available in Google Home, which might be more practical over your morning coffee. At first, I was skeptical of how useful Google Assistant would be. After all, voice assistants haven't really delivered on their promise in the past, and some poor voice recognition aside, it's actually a really great experience. I agree that the hot word is a great way to unlock your phone and fire up the search before having a conversation. For example, during my travels it was the easiest way to look up exchange rate information, search for things nearby and find out the weather or time anywhere in the world, all with a few well-chosen words. Of course, it's not all perfect and there's still many features we'd like to see added or better implemented. We'll be going into Google Assistant in a more in-depth feature in the near future, but big takeaway is it's a good feature to have that should hopefully only get better with time.